Welcome, everyone. My name's Mark, and I am one of the TAs in Mark Rober's monthly course. And I'm here with Chris and James, who are two fellow TAs. First, if you guys don't mind, I'd like you to introduce yourselves, tell us a little bit about your background, and then I'll do me. Chris, would you like to go first?
Sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Chris. As Mark said, I'm one of the TAs for this sessions of Mark's class. I've just been an avid tinkerer all of my life. I've got some background on product development and some engineering background on a couple of pieces that we've made. But mostly it's just been a very avid hobbyist for a long time. So nice to see everybody.
Well, thanks for joining us, Chris. And James, how about you, sir?
Awesome. So, hi, everybody. I'm James. I actually I'm similar to Chris in that I'm a bit of a hobbyist. I have a little bit of past in some engineering field work. I have some electrical engineering, some astro engineering, and I am currently working with a software company. So I'm a little bit all over the place, but it's been really cool to kind of plug in with this group of guys and see what we can offer to people who want some help.
Absolutely. My name's Mark. I'm an electrical engineer. I create content for electrical engineers now, more than design boards. And one of my current projects is the one where I accidentally left the banner up called Teach Me PCB, where I am teaching engineers how to make their very first circuit board. So it's all sorts of fun. We're still waiting for some guests to join us, so hopefully they'll get here soon. But while we do, this is all of our first time as TAs through the monthly project. And it's great seeing everything that you do. Chris and James, do you guys have any favorite projects so far?
I think I have an easy one to jump on to begin with. I'm realizing as I'm new to this that I have a little bit of a soft spot for the really young engineers at heart, right? The ones that don't yet know they're engineers. But I have one project that's working on just adding some mechanical facial features to a jack-o'-lantern and wants to see how we can make them move. And that's just been kind of inspiring. It's just really cool to see how he's trying to think through some of those early stage, mechanical systems to make something actuate or make something connect and hinge, right? But yeah, I would say that's probably right up there on my list.
That's a really cool one. I like that.
Yeah. How about you, Chris?
I think one of my favorites so far is somebody's working on a pen-like device that, when pressed up against fruit, it can tell how soft the fruit is to determine the ripeness of the fruit, which I thought was brilliant. So,
Yeah.
Again, if it's, however they make this plunger mechanism to test the firmness, I thought that was just so cool and such a neat idea. Yeah, I'm really curious to see how that's going to come along, and I was curious to see, what fruits are going to have the, a similar softness and ripeness, and I think that's just a really neat project. I'm excited for that one.
And I was actually amazed by the number of participants who were protecting food from, thieving brothers and sisters and parents and whatnot.
There's a lot.
It's protecting from oneself or one's family members, right? Like one or the other.
There's always the bad sibling. I've noticed that.
That's pretty great.
I loved it.
Yeah, but there's also some projects that scare us a little bit. I'll give an example. In, my other job, I often take things apart to see how they work. And 2 weeks ago, I took apart a microwave. It had 3 different switches to ensure that the door was closed before it turned on, right? Engineers have to design safety into their things. Things do have to work, but they also have to not hurt people. And that's a lesson where it's hard to teach new people all the myriad of ways things can go wrong. There are just so many unintended consequences. So sometimes you'll see us steer you away from a project that we think might be a little too dangerous to take on as a new engineer, just because we don't want to see anybody get hurt. I don't know about you gentlemen, but my hands are covered with scars that are lessons of,
I also have a few screwdrivers that are a little pockmarked from arcing. So yeah, no, I think we've all
There you
been
go.
there and done that. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's
We're not trying to stifle your creativity. We just want your first project to be as successful as possible. Speaking of which, are there any things that, without naming any projects too specifically, are there any things that you've seen so far that particularly scare you?
yeah. I mean, for me, there's a few projects that were spring loading or tensioning a cutting implement of some sort. So either spring loading a knife to automatically dice food or chop things up. Um, anytime that you put tension behind a cutting instrument, you need to take those things really seriously. And that's when you can really hurt yourself. It's great ideas. I mean, I think that the designs are fun. I think it's a really cool project, but yeah, I mean, that's the concern I would have, is just make sure that you have safety releases, you have safety catches, and safety is, really the first thing you should be considering when you're making these things.
Yeah. Or just don't do it.
Yeah, well, that too. Yeah, exactly. It's, for somebody's first engineering project, making, again, a tension, cutting device, probably not the best first engineering project, just because of the things behind it.
Yeah. James, how about you, sir?
Yeah, I would say it's a similar answer again, right? It's the anything that involves a sharp object, right, seems to be the most potential for trouble, right? You can do some awesome, right, design and testing without including any sharp objects, right? And then go, well, at some point you could, in theory, right? A great example, which is not necessarily a specific project here, we've seen a few like it, but would be something that wants to like split open a piece of food, right? You can do something that serves effectively kind of like a log splitter, right? But doesn't need to have the same sharp edges, and can have some safeguards in place to say, right, don't put your hand in here, and it doesn't need to move quickly, right? It's been interesting to see, like, some people have reacted really well, right, to the idea where they're like, oh, I can just apply the pressure, but I don't really need the blade, right? And all of a sudden, I think that's what makes it feel really, really rewarding for me, right? Is the, like, that opportunity to go, yeah, you can still accomplish that, right? Just maybe remove that part that might sever a limb, right?
By all means, man. And to that point, I actually brought something in. When I joined monthly, one of the projects that I wanted to do, and I'll share with you guys in a couple minutes, was a pneumatic can crusher. So there are plenty of them on Amazon right now, but there is only one that I saw that actually has a plastic cover to keep you from putting your hands in when the piston goes down. So there's a little button that you press to activate the piston, and it's difficult for you to get a hand in there. Now, a child certainly could, but you can get around that by mounting it up high. But that's an example of a safeguard, something to keep you from hurting yourself. And then I will show you an example of a project that is inherently dangerous in just a minute. But I wanted to get Chris's and James, if you have any other thoughts on safeguards before we move on.
I'd just echo exactly what you pointed out, right? A lot of times those less safe parts can still be present if you know what you're doing, but they need to be protected, right? There needs to be thought given to how you keep, right, soft substances or people, right, out of the system you're creating. And that guards don't have to be complex to be effective, right? I think that's the beauty of it.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And it could be as simple as, a limit switch, or, just something to break a circuit, something to kill the power to the firing mechanism or the arming mechanism. It as you said, it doesn't have to be complicated, but just some way that the default is disarmed and not active, if that makes sense.
Oh, it totally does. If you've got a air tank, some way to let air out of the tank, right, without discharging the piston. Speaking of which, so once you do get some engineering chops under you, you can take on more, let's call them riskier projects. But some things are inherently dangerous. I did a project for monthly that I knew was going to be a little dangerous, but I didn't quite understand how dangerous, and nobody stopped me. So I'm going to show you a project now that as a TA, I probably wouldn't recommend, and I might not even allow. So let's take a quick look. This has been an unusual project. This is the first time I can remember that everything has just gone together. I've been able to find all the parts in a scrap bin or on eBay or on Amazon, and everything showed up when it needed to. That really never happens in a project, and I don't expect it to happen again anytime soon, but the result is truly stunning. We've got really a weapon that is designed to smash soda cans at high velocity into a wall. And based on the slow speed function of a GoPro and a phone, I was able to figure out roughly how fast these things travel. And about 60 psi, that's a little less than 50 meters per second. When you take into account that velocity as well as the mass of the soda can, really this thing is potentially very, very hazardous. But it does what we designed it to do. It does destroy soda cans, and it kills them dead. For anybody that'd like to duplicate this project, it's really not that hard, but man, I really have to advise you not to let kids near this. It's just a little too potentially dangerous to let a kid have this unsupervised. I've got no problem with an adult doing it, but make sure you keep it within your property lines and don't point it at anything living ever, or anything of value or potentially fragile, like a house. Anyways, this has been fun. In 3, 2, 1, launching. There was my project one for monthly.
That was great. Seeing those numbers, I was like,
yeah.
There's some potential there, like some real potential.
Yeah. The distance alone is pretty impressive, but yeah. It's,
but hey, like you said, it crushed the can.
Yeah, it did. Just to give viewers at home an idea of what 500 joules is, it's roughly the same amount of energy that comes out of a 40 caliber bullet when it's fired. That's what the police and FBI carry. It's a lot of energy. So you don't want that to hit anybody. And in fact, I've never fired it since. If I do, I'm taking it to a professional range.
Yeah.
You know,
great call.
Yep. Good plan on that.
But I didn't really know it was going to work that well until I built it. You know?
Yeah, I guess, I have a similar experience when I was making my first project was a pneumatic, poking mechanism to, poke potatoes. When I did the slow motion video of that, it was terrifying, to be honest. I mean, just watching these forks, under pneumatic pressure drop into a potato and just seeing the pressure of everything actually lift the entire mechanism back up off the bench. There was a lot of velocity behind that, and I mean, to be fair, I kind of laughed maniacally, but then it dawned on me, it's like, okay, this is when things need to change. This is when we need to put in safety mechanisms. This is when we need to design a door, a hatch, basically, where it disarms the entire mechanism until everything is closed and sealed. And that was kind of, I think that slow motion video for me is what did it. And again, definitely maniacal laughter on my part, I'm not going to lie, but also the realization of, okay, now we need to step back and really look at the engineering behind this and treat this with the respect it deserved. So
by all means. And with that in mind, actually, let me switch to overhead cam here. Give me a second. I'm still learning how to use everything. This is a pneumatic switch. that you can plug things in, and you can use it to energize a pneumatic circuit or de-energize a pneumatic circuit. So it wouldn't take too much work to figure out how to hook this up to a door or something else, so that if the door was open, it turns it off. If the door's closed, it turns it back on. And you can add safety that way. And this isn't the only type of thing that you can have. There's also devices like this, which is an adjustable release mechanism. So you can set how much pressure you're allowed to have in your tank or whatever holding device that you have before it starts to leak out of these holes. So that's a way to make sure that if somebody hooks up to a big air compressor outside, that they're not storing too much energy in your device and, causing things to blow up. We've also got another thing. I'm going to come off of, I need to grab it off the cart behind me. So I'm going to come off of that view. But there's also other ways to de-energize your circuits. Oh no, where is it? Oh, here it is. This is a inline switch, right? Just an inline. So if you hook this up on the output of your device, if you needed to get the air out without firing anything, there you go. Gentlemen, you still with me?
So I feel like that's very, very useful, especially for those who are probably introducing themselves, maybe as a part of this class, to the world of pneumatics, right? Or at least, stored pressures, right? It's a really capable, set of tools that you're putting in your hand, but it's also very easy to over-engineer your solution, right? And then you find yourself, just like you said with your can crusher, right? It's I thought I would need a certain amount of pressure, and so I got it. And when I test fired, lo and behold, right? It's really fun to get to know, but boy, yeah, I would tell younger me or less experienced me that I would definitely want to emphasize that more, right, as I was learning. Because yeah, it's cool, right? It does make us grin, but for certain, knowing what safety mechanisms exist is a big first step, right? So yeah, that's a great call. I like that idea.
When I did my my can a Polt or whatever, should have come up with a cool name for it. I assumed that I would, I did some I got a degree in physics. I did a back of the envelope math. I knew how much energy I had stored in that tank. And I assumed that because, a good engine maybe is 30% efficient. So I assumed, everything fits kind of loose. There's a lot of leakage. Maybe I'll be lucky if I get 10% of the energy out of that tank. I did good.
So, let's say somebody exceeded their expectations. Right?
So you exceeded design goals on that one.
That gives me an idea. I think Chris grabbed something. Did you have something to show us?
Yeah, I was looking around for it. I gotta keep digging. But the other thing I was thinking of was just a basic limit switch, just an electronic, just a door latch, basically. And I'll see if I can dig one up out of the shelves back here. But that's what I used on my project, again, just to isolate the danger area, right, and to disarm the system. So there's you had some really great mechanical options. I was just trying to find my electronic option. So
there's also, and I think I have one here, pneumatic limit switches.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. So when something hits at, let me get to the overhead view here again. I think that was camera 4. So when something either bumps into this, or maybe you have something that rolls along it and then pushes it down, it will switch the output from one to the other. So yeah, what I think Chris is looking for is an electronic version of one of these.
Yeah.
Where If you can't find one, Chris, let me know and I
Yeah.
will
Let me
sneak
dig. I think I
away.
know where it is. I'm hiding in
Okay.
my parts cage at the office today, so let me go. I'm gonna go rummage and see what I can come back with. Right back.
Nice.
Absolutely. Hey, while we're letting him do that, let me ask you this, James.
Uh-huh.
What about an achievable first goal?
Yeah. So I think you kind of talked a little bit about how you did some napkin math and what what you were intending to do was right. You said, all right, I understand. This is the way I would describe it. I understand the landscape of what things commonly use that are similar, right? So in your case, it was an engine, right? If I were talking about a system that I built during the course was simply a almost like a toy. The purpose was to simply register whether the person was consuming water out of a cup, right? So at some point you're taking measurements. If they're not drinking water, we shoot them with a squirt gun, right? It's a fairly straightforward system, but talking about the achievable goal, right? I could very easily start kind of brainstorming these ideas, which is the beauty, I think, of the way that Mark walks us through in the course, right? This concept of saying, okay, let's break that down, right? I could start talking about all the different ways to measure whether a water cup is being filled or not. I could talk about the different ways to build pressure in a line to shoot water. I could talk about how much water is really needed to do this job. And quickly, I think, as is often the problem for first time kind of project builders, we run into the overwhelming amount of information that's available to us, but we don't know how to parse it. And so for me, I think it's that achievable goal is then saying, first time I'm building this, I'm going to say, all right, I know that ultimately it has to shoot water at the person, right? It's a really simple goal. It could be achieved with an off-the-shelf squirt gun, right? And then the next question is, how much water do I really need to give it, right? How many of the materials provided do I need? And then that first goal doesn't have to be, right? So as we saw with some of Mark's builds, those first objectives were wildly inaccurate or were wildly over or under powered. And that's okay. That's part of the experimentation process. But man, that first goal is simply breaking the machine down to the simple, right? The simple machines that you're going to build it out of. The rest of it's tuning. Yeah. I would say to me, that's where what I would call the first goal, right, is just the break it down, right? You got that one post-it note in front of you if you did it on post-it notes, right? You got that one post-it note in front of you that says, I need to shoot a piece of candy, right? There's 100 different ways to do that. Pick one and build it, right?
Yeah, I think that was definitely some of the feedback I gave on a couple of the projects that I've seen so far is, you're making it's a really cool project. It's a really complex project. The most important thing is to kind of back up look at the sub assemblies of there and seeing how each one of those interacts with the other. And or else I know it's very, very easy to get overwhelmed by the scope and the scale of the project once you get into it if you kind of don't look at those sub assemblies. I mean, some of the projects were really cool, but I had to warn a couple people. It's like, just keep in mind it's a very fast paced class, and if the project scope and scale, you got to be able to do it in a week, essentially. So keep that in mind, and you can still make something simple but very, very cool. It doesn't need to be so over engineered as we spoke about a little bit ago. It could be a simple design that is very impactful and very cool. But it's keep it simple. I think would be.
This isn't going to be the last time in your life that you'll have an opportunity to build something.
No, it's
great way to look at it.
Yeah, it's a great way to start. It's some of your first really cool projects down a long path. I mean, there's lots of places to go with it. So I think it's awesome.
Yeah.
I did find my switch. I
Oh,
get I get an
right.
oversized one here. So the company I work with, we sell very big printers. They're anywhere from 3.5 to 5 meter wide print beds. So
wow.
they're big. And that's where I stole the pneumatics from for the potato poker. So like I said, there's a little oomph behind them. But so my limit switch is definitely oversized, but gives you a very clear idea what happens. So basically, you know, you have your electric circuit that's going to go in the end. So, and then basically is this, okay, I'm not sure if we can kind of
Oh,
hear it there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
let me isolate you too.
Yeah. So, but basically that's the switch. So when the doors, you know, open or close, it'll push this in, break the circuit. As soon as it opens, you know, then you know you have connection. And this is another good way to, you know, build in safety to your project. I mean, again, similar solutions, just different ways to go about it. So
Yeah. And like I said, microwaves, the one I took apart had 3 doing the exact same job.
that's really interesting that they're so redundant in there.
Yeah, I was really quite surprised myself too. 2, sure. I mean, 1 certainly. 2
Right.
makes
Well,
sense.
Yeah.
3, I
Yeah.
Yeah.
You were really preventing the creative individual looking to get around your safety system, right?
Well, I mean, even with our machines, I mean, depending on where they go in the world, they all have different safety mechanisms and safety rules. So, you know, there might be that many seemingly redundant systems, but they meet the goals for the country that they're going into. So, you know, I'm as surprising it is, in some ways, I'm probably not surprised. Just to meet UL listings, CE listings, and all those other things. There's different guidelines.
yeah.
So, yeah.
And James, you brought up several topics earlier, and then Chris harped on them. One of them was building blocks. One of the things I teach in electrical engineering, right? We don't tackle the whole circuit. We tackle part of the circuit and then deal with how that interacts with the next part and how that interacts with the next part. And it's not exactly Rube Goldberg, but that provides you a frame of reference, right?
Kind
You
of
get
is
one
though,
thing
right?
working.
Yeah. It is. That's I feel like that's the probably the Achilles heel of most hobbyist tinkerers, right? Like we love, I would say most, maybe not all, but most love taking apart things that are complex and seeing how they work, right? There's something satisfying about understanding a more complex machine. But remember that building it is the opposite of taking it apart, right? Because when you're taking it apart, you have this whole contraption right in front of you. A coffee maker is a fairly fundamentally simple machine. But if I asked you to design one from the ground up, it might seem overbearing, right? Like at first, it's kind of that like being able to then step into the individual problem and go, okay, I need to, coffee maker, I need to heat water, right? I need to have some mechanism to collect the water. I need to have some way to move the water even when it's hot, right? And it's just interesting, like you said, it's just the same as the circuits, right? Like in that you have to go, okay, the objective of this section is, and then build that. And then you're going to find restrictions that force you to rebuild that section. If you're me, at least a dozen times, right? Because I'm good like that. I like to call it, you know, it's my euphemism for it, but I like to iterate on my own ideas about 3 times as much as anybody else does. And it's not because I have great ideas. No, I would totally echo that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that I completely agree. And again, James, I agree with you. You know, my first 2 or 3 attempts at something never go well. You know, so it's, but you know, again, it's iteration, right? So you kind of you learn as you go, and I think that might kind of go back to a little bit what I was rambling on about earlier. Is we have 1 week, you know, between projects, so the more complex you make it, the less time for iteration you have. So
Mistakes happen. Mistakes are common.
Mistakes are good sometimes. You know.
That can launcher that I showed you, that video, that might very well be the first time in my life that the thing worked the first time. One of the companies I represent, Royal Circuit Solutions, we make boards for electrical engineers. We make a lot of them. Somewhere upwards of 93 to 97% of those designs go on hold because we identify at least one mistake that an engineer has made. Okay, these are people putting things in space that we build stuff for, right? The stuff that's in your car right now. And we don't build their board because we find a mistake that they made. It is not a reflection on who you are as a human being. It's a reflection of how difficult and complex the process is.
That's a great stat. I'd say I definitely will steal that.
It's yours.
But it's that's exactly it. So kind of playing off your theme, for a short while, and I mentioned it real early on, but for a short while, I did some subcontracting work. Think like the little guy of the little guy of the little guy, right? Who was working on some of the new engine designs for a company that had just been forming at the time and is now all over the news, known as SpaceX, right? What they wanted was effectively parts that nobody had iterated on yet, right? Like they weren't things that people had a lot of. And exactly what you're saying, we probably made on our little tiny piece of that puzzle, we made at least 50 iterations of that part, right? And then we turned it in and collected the contract, right? And then 2 months later, our part was outmoded because it wasn't the most efficient solution anymore, right? That's not failure, right? Like that, it's easy to tell that story, I think, especially in the, like, if people who are, watching this or participating in the class are in the highly academic environments, right? It's your experiment didn't work. It's like, oh no, it worked. It worked beyond expectations because now look at what the company's doing based on the knowledge we learned by doing it wrong, right? I try to emphasize that everywhere because we look at companies like that and people like to talk about the big headline making achievements, but hundreds, thousands of iterations of what might be termed failure, but really aren't, are what led to that.
Yeah, what's the Franklin quote? I didn't learn one way to build a light bulb. I learned 1,000 ways not to build a light bulb.
Yeah,
it's 100%.
It's funny. I don't know why I just thought of this, but I remember, growing up, you'd have those jobs that you didn't like, right? Those jobs that are just like, oh no, I don't want to do that again. But I just remember my mom saying, it's really interesting because now you know what you don't want to do. And, there's some wisdom behind that. And, I've kind of applied that to this project too. It's, it's like, okay, well, now you know what doesn't work. And then you kind of go back and look at the next iteration of it. You make those next steps. And sometimes, those failures produce something that is completely something special, and something you didn't anticipate coming out of it. And there's a lot of inventions out there that are brilliant that were never supposed to be there, that came from failure. So I don't know.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Very true. Something else you mentioned earlier, James, was the idea of constraint. And there probably would be worthwhile going over some ideas such as over constraint, under constraint, artificial constraints. One of the reasons I don't work with my brother is because of his willingness to impose unnecessary restraints and, in fact, just stupid ones on things he wants me to help him with. He wanted a commercial design for I think it was a pill sensor. I don't know. It's been a few years. And he wanted me to use hobby servos in it instead of, motors and actuators. And I'm like, no. He's like, but they're only $1. No.
There's a reason for that.
Yeah, right. Yeah. They're inexpensive.
This is going to be something that handles medication. No.
You do want this to work 3 days from now, right?
Yeah, right. It's like, man. So constraint. What where do you use it in your design process to spawn creativity? And this is for Chris too. It's just James was the one who gave me the idea. Where do you use it in your process to spawn creativity? Where do you remove it? And where do you put it back in?
That's a great question. I was like, Chris, if you want to jump in, you're welcome to take off. All right, I'll tap dance for you for a little bit. How about
you
that?
tap dance. I'm thinking about
All
this
right,
one.
here we go.
That's a good one.
No, that's a fantastic question, right? I think some of the best engineers, what I would call the best, right? But some of the best engineers are actually really good at developing and managing their constraints more than they are, we often think of a good engineer as this person that's very skilled at being handed a specific movement or a specific action or a specific circuit, right? And being able to achieve it elegantly but simply. Oftentimes, the people who come up with those solutions are going to be the ones that said, all right, tell me what it is we're doing, right? And I would say this for me is like the first big piece is I want to know in the big picture, what is it that we're doing? I don't have to accomplish the big picture now, but I do need to know generally where we're headed, right? So for instance, if it's, let's say if it's something in your build is intended to be related to food preparation, you probably don't want to use materials that are unsafe around food unless, and this is where you can, a good constraint, right? You can say, well, I could over constrain this and say I can only use things that I would feel safe eating off of. But maybe another way to look at that is to intentionally flip the script, right? To say, well, for the purpose of the build, right? As is even often the case with some of Mark's builds that you see in his videos. He's looking to accomplish the entertainment portion of the task more than he is the, in this case, like if it was a food constraint, the safety mechanism that makes it edible, right? We don't want it to be dangerous, but let's say you wanted to cut a piece of food. There are a lot of ways to cut a piece of food, but I might not actually need to constrain myself to say, you know what? This build could be accomplished much easier if my constraint is instead that I don't have to be able to eat off of it, right? And I think that speaks a little bit to so there's the big picture, what am I doing cutting food? But the second piece, which is what helps me remove some of the unnecessary, it's well, what if I intentionally change what I'm assuming to be true? And I think that might have been a piece you were hinting at there as well. A little bit of that, the artificial constraint, right? If I'm talking about food, maybe I'm assuming that I'm going to eat whatever this is. But what if I don't? Right? If I don't, then that changes my options for how I can accomplish this task. And I think there's a whole lifetime of learning there, but I would say the best absolute beginner question that I could ask to anyone would be, okay, what are you assuming? And how can you challenge that?
Thank you so much, James. Chris?
That's going to be a hard one to follow because I think this is brilliant. Thanks for screwing all that up. I appreciate
Oh, well, I'll just see myself out now.
I think for me, the challenge I have with constraints is material constraints. I have only X amount of tools to make something. I only have X amount of materials to do this. I only have X amount of dollars to make this work. And those are very real constraints. And they are, I think it depends on how you look at those constraints. Either it is a negative, like, okay, geez, I just can't build this because I don't have the tool set, the skill set, whatever. Or, okay, how do I challenge myself and work within these constraints? And again, I think some of the really cool projects that come out of it, are within those constraints. And I'll kind of go back to my own thought process when I was making my giant potato poker was, okay, well, boy, I'm going to have pneumatics in there. I need to anchor it down. It's going to have to be made out of 80-20 aluminum. There's like all these things. And my mind kept going away. Okay, it's going to be a top load thing. So I need some way to put the potato in there and all these things. And then, I'm just laying there in bed one night. I was okay, let's just back up. Let's remove all of these, constraints that I've built on this project and just strip it down to bare minimum. What am I doing? I'm making holes in a potato. Okay. Well, I'm trying to, over engineer all these different things, to hold the potatoes. Like, well, the potato is just sitting on the ground. It's not going to go anywhere, So again, and then ultimately it's like, well, there's no reason to make it out of wood or out of aluminum. I can make it out of wood, So again, it's, I think I don't know if it's really answering your question or not. It's understanding what the constraints are at a high level and working within those and making it, make your project better in some ways. I think if you have certain constraints and you build to those, I think that's not only a challenge, but it's sometimes inspirational. Like, geez, look what I've done with nothing. And I think what helped me a lot in the builds for Mark's class was, here's the constraints. You need to make something that it's with food, and you can only use mechanical means to do it. Those are pretty broad constraints, but it helped focus it. So they're broad enough where you can, I feel like I'm rambling now. They're broad enough where you can get the project going, but it gives you enough leeway to be creative within that space. So it's easy to over constrain yourself while navigating down this, this build. So yeah, I don't know. It's a complicated one. It really is.
No, it is, but I think you both gave great answers. And then the only thing I'll add to it is something that Chris just kind of touched on towards the end. Inspirational, right? Constraint can be inspirational. Sometimes I will challenge myself to solve a problem just with parts that are within arm's reach, or just with parts that I can see from my chair. And I'll spin around my room and I'll look and I'll see what there is to do. And sometimes it comes up with some pretty interesting things. I've got all sorts of fancy tools for working with electronics, but the people in my class don't. So how are they going to hold their parts in place, right? I've got, am I going to have them go out and buy a $600 microscope? Of course not. What are we going to do? Well, how are we going to hold the parts in place? How about this? Just a little big fat weighted wire that just sits and just pokes down. That's all it has to be. So sometimes constraint is good unless you are over constraining yourself or making a false assumption, and you guys both hit on both of those. Let me ask you one more question, and then let's go ahead and end this, because there's not a whole lot of people here. it's us, but I think, oh no, actually, you know what it is? We do have some people that are trying to get in. I wonder if I set something else up wrong. It's been a fascinating conversation regardless.
That's been a lot of fun. I'd love to do this
I appreciate
again.
it. Yeah.
I'd love to do this again. This has been really, it's been interesting.
Yeah.
And
also,
also
hearing everyone else's perspective is like equally, if not more valuable to me, right? It's we've all got different experiences, and I know we've all made different mistakes. So, and probably some of the same ones.
Okay, well, we do have a guest, but while I'm working with him to try to get him online, let me ask you a question about sourcing materials. Where do you get all this stuff without breaking the bank?
Amazon was my friend for this build. AliExpress and all those things for components is definitely a cheaper option. You just have a longer lead time. But yeah, I hit up Amazon hard for electronic components for this build. And luckily, I admit that, I had a stash of stuff too, of, previous projects that didn't go the way I wanted, or just, my special tubs of geek parts buried in the garage. I was like, okay, let's start tearing into this and see what we can come up with. So for me, it was a mixture of both.
Yeah, I would definitely say the same thing where I was like, hey, I like the simplest answer, and I think if I remember right, I think it's even something that Mark talked about briefly was use what you're comfortable with, right? Um, there are classes where the objective of the class is to teach yourself to work with metal, right? If you're not a metal worker, if you're not a metal worker, I would almost exclusively say maybe steer clear for this course. Not because I think it's bad to push yourself, always be learning, right? Like that, yes, do that. But if you find yourself fighting, right, the material you're working with, you have about a week to turn the thing around, right?
The
You
week
will
comes
stress.
quick.
Yeah, it does. It does. I mean, I know I've seen everybody mention it so far, and I just want to throw that in there as well. That week, man, by your third project, you're going, okay, I hit my pace a little while ago, and now I'm just finishing the run that I'm out for, right?
Yep.
But no, I would say like for the materials, I am by much more experience than all the rest. From the shop perspective, I'm more of a woodworker, right?
Yep.
A lot of my stuff, build it with wood, right? I especially for the purposes of the class. Like if I needed on, for instance, one of my projects, I needed, some form of tubing and piping. Well, those are fairly readily and easily bought at stores around you. Um, but when it came to like bracing and framing and things like that, yeah, you can go the more expensive or even not expensive but not quick options.
Mm-hmm.
That just isn't the case for this class, right? I think I mean I don't know if I speak for everyone, but again, for myself, more than once I was going, well, this project is as good as it's going to get by today. I have all kinds of ideas for ways we could keep working on it,
Well,
and
yeah,
that's okay,
I've gone
right?
back into those projects after the class and gone back,
Yep.
okay, well, this should have been a different
Yeah.
switch. This
Well,
we
I
needed
think
this,
yeah.
and this design was really bad, but I got away with it. So
Mhm.
I think that's again back to the iteration thing, right? So
That's super.
it's just the way
Yeah.
it works. And I know the clock that I made, my moon clock that I did, um, that's different now than it was then. I mean, the base has all been redone and redesigned and reprinted, and things changed. But and what I didn't say in the video is what supported the clock, the little moon on the top. That was a fountain that I had built years ago that failed. It was been rolling around in my garage forever. It's like, oh, finally got a use for this, So again, it's just
That's
what
great.
do you have laying around?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
And then
sort of echoes your what you were saying about your creativity being spawned by your constraints, right, Mark? It was that like, hey, what do I have? I've got some old AC drain hose here. Looks like we're gonna use that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, anyway, sorry, you were gonna say something, Mark.
oh no, that's fine. But I was also going to say keep an eye out for. It depends on where you live. If you're in the middle of rural Ohio, you're going to have a different life experience than me, who lives in the middle of LA. But I've got all sorts of scrap and remnant yards around. So if I want metal, a piece of metal for a project, let's just call it a 1-inch tube, 0.95 thick. I go down to Home Depot, they're going to want $16-20 for that. I go down to the remnant yard, they're going to want $2.
Yeah.
Most of my air cylinders, my pneumatics, you buy those on Amazon, anywhere from, let's call it $15 to $100 a piece. I go down there, I pay maybe $1 or $2 a piece for them because they sell them by the pound as scrap metal.
Yeah.
You got to start looking around, and when you do see deals and you're like, oh, maybe I can use that in the future. And if you can afford it, grab it. Don't go overboard. You don't need to become a hoarder, but some of if you go down to, the local home store, Home Depot, Lowe's, whatever, or Ace, or, whatever it is, and you look at it and you're like, man, that's expensive. It is, because they're making money off of it. There's cheaper, much cheaper ways to go about things.
Yeah.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jeffrey, were you able to rejoin? I don't see you in the waiting room there, buddy. All right. Any final thoughts before we wrap up today's?
No, thanks so much for putting this together. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I would love to do this again. This is a great conversation. And again, I appreciate you guys' feedback. It's going to definitely help with my hours in front of me tonight, wading through projects and kind of giving feedback on stuff. So again, thanks guys. It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. Thank you.
Appreciate you guys joining me. It would have been a lonely hour here all by myself.
I say echo that same thing. It's fun. It's a good conversation. I think it also helps us just see, full transparency, right? I'm a big fan of that in the way we run projects, right?
Yeah.
But in full transparency, as we learn how to TA effectively, right, for the course, this is how we're going to learn from each other, right? Is to go, well, so I said this and this didn't work so hot, right?
Yeah.
Well, let's schedule another one. What are good days and times for you, gentlemen?
Looking at the calendar.
Let's see here. Mondays for me are some of the best days. Let's see here. Pull up my 8 billion
Monday
calendars.
works for me too. Nighttime too. I mean, I do have some other things going with my course, but you can always make something work,
Yeah, I've set office hours like Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday evenings from 6 to 8 my time in Colorado. But I definitely can tie that into my office hours if you want, or whatever works for you guys. But Mondays during the day, I'm definitely flexible. So.
Okay, Monday day. You said Tuesday and Wednesday from 6 to 8 Central Time?
Mountain Time for me.
Mountain Time.
Yep.
Okay. And then how about you, James?
I say the Monday time works really well. I would be less available Tuesday, Wednesday in the evening, but maybe Thursday or Friday would work. No pressure though.
How about Thursday? Thursday evening, Chris?
Thursday evening. Yeah, I'm usually back here. Back at my place around 6, so around 5 p.m. your time.
You're back. So we could do 6 p.m. your time, because that gives you time to, eat and relax a little after the workday. So that's 7 p.m. our time.
No, actually, I'm an hour ahead of you. So that's perfect. So if you do 7 your time, because you're in LA, right?
Yeah.
So yes, if we do 7 Pacific Coast, that's 8 for me, and that works great. I love it.
Okay.
That'd be
James.
6 would be 9 for me. But yeah, I don't mind that. 9 to 10ish, somewhere in there.
Where are you?
I'm East Coast. I'm actually in Indiana.
Indiana.
So you were talking about that guy in rural Ohio. You weren't too far off.
Yeah,
I'm about 15 miles from the border there. Right?
Whereabouts in Indiana?
Northeast part, so just a little bit south of Fort Wayne. I'm originally from the Indianapolis area, but
I spent a couple summers out at Culver. So
okay, yeah, absolutely. I had a good buddy who grew up there. Yeah.
Yep.
Should we move it? We'll discuss it in Slack and then we'll send it out to everybody. But we can push it up an hour so it's not so late for James. Whatever you guys want to do. I'm open Thursday.
Happy to make it work.
Cool. Yeah, no, I've really enjoyed the conversation as well. So you guys have the link to the YouTube. That'll be available now. By the time you come back, I will figure out how to get my little Teach Me PCB logo out of the corner there.
That's okay. It gives me a place to hide.
Yeah. You can duck and cover. I'm wide open out here.
I look so much better now. No.
But I really appreciate it. Feel free to share it amongst your monthly contacts. The only thing, I don't really want people subscribing to this channel. I don't do anything with it. And I don't want to appear like I'm trying to snipe visitors from monthly or Mark Rober or anything like that. So just saying, hey, watch the conversation, don't subscribe. So and we'll be good.
Perfect.
Cool. All right, gentlemen.
Appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much. And we'll do it all again Thursday, hopefully with some guests.
Sounds great.
It was a lot of fun. Thanks, guys. Have a great day.
Thank you again, Mark. Thanks, Chris.
Take care, everyone. Bye.